Hurrah! This is Sgt Pitbull Pittman with WCW World Championship Wrestling, and I'm here to do a career interview. Hurrah! For Hannibal TV. So you maggots, listen up. I want you to pay close attention to the Pitbull's career, so you know what's going on and you know what's happened now. Hurrah!
This is Hannibal from thehannibaltv.com, and today is our guest. We have former WCW star and former national champion, multiple-time national champion, Greco-Roman wrestler who also has a lot of other wonderful amateur credentials that we're going to get into, Sgt Craig Pitbull Pittman, who looks a lot different. How are you doing today?
Hey, I'm doing fine, and yeah, I do look a little different. I've lost a lot of weight, but that'll be part of the story here.
Well, we may as well get that out of the way first. Why did you decide to lose all this weight? Because you were always known as being a really thick, muscular guy as a wrestler.
Yeah, back in the day when I was wrestling for WCW and even previous amateur wrestling events, I was about 286 pounds. I was a much bigger boy than I am today. I'm about 180 pounds today as we sit and speak. But I enjoyed the amateur competitions for the fact that I was agile for a big guy, and I was actually one of the smallest heavyweights in the world. Even at that size, I was one of the smallest heavyweights in the world, but I could move, I was fast, and I was in really good shape. So the weight thing, yeah, I'm a little lighter now, but it doesn't mean that I still can't go at it. So the fans want to know that.
So to start this off, what was your childhood like?
My childhood, and by the way, I have my brother in the studio today, so we were pretty close. But my childhood, I grew up in Long Island. Well, I actually grew up in New York City, in the Brooklyn area, when we were small. And then my parents moved out to Long Island, Freeport, Long Island. So I grew up in a relatively nice family community, and went to high school there, and that's where I actually got involved in wrestling. My former high school coach, Terry Hayes, recruited me to the wrestling team. I was actually on my way to the basketball. I was going to basketball trials the day that I dumped basketball for wrestling. You know, I ran into the wrestling coach, and he said, "Come on down." And I went down to the wrestling room, and this little hot, sweaty pit. Went up in there, and I tell you, it immediately struck my interest. So that's where it all started.
And were you good at it immediately, or did it take a few years?
That's a story. And when I speak to the kids, I tell them about that. I lost every single match for about 3 years. Couldn't wrestle. You know, I was a small guy, and these guys were just good. And I couldn't wrestle. But after about 3 years, it kind of kicked in, and my senior year, I won the Greco-Roman states out of Long Island, and then I was recruited by, when we got to the Nationals out in Iowa, I was recruited by University of Kentucky, and I ended up going to school there, but in a little bit later, I'll tell you the rest of that story. But I ended up going to school in Kentucky and wrestling for that program, which disbanded the next year after I got the scholarship to Kentucky. They dropped the whole SEC dropped the program, wrestling program. Right. I don't know if you remember back then.
I just know that Kentucky's never really been known as a big wrestling state, from my knowledge.
Yeah, it wasn't. Yeah, but Fletcher Carr, one of the Carr brothers, was the coach.
Okay.
And he was recruiting a really good team. You know, Joe Carr was his assistant coach, and you know Jimmy Carr, who was an Olympian, who was also the Carr family. So big name, but not a big state.
I see.
Yeah.
Was there any bit of a culture shock to you going from Long Island to Kentucky?
Not that much. Not that much of a culture shock there. later on, there was a culture shock when I left the Marine Corps for a while to take a scholarship to Oklahoma State. Got out to Oklahoma State, and there was the culture shock.
Okay. So what happened when they disbanded the program? Is that when you joined the Marine Corps?
No, actually, I went back home because without that scholarship, I didn't have the money to really finance college. So, and my parents couldn't do it at the time. We had all my brothers and sisters, and they couldn't really do it at the time. So, but scholarships would have to be the way for me to get to college and do my thing. So I went to junior college, Nassau Community Junior College, and actually wrestled there for a year. I did really good, got all the way to the Nationals, and first match in the Nationals, I body slammed this guy. I can't remember his name, the guy I was wrestling, but I body slammed him, and he saw the opportunity. I was, picked to win that thing. He saw the opportunity to go ahead and play hurt, and I got disqualified first round of the Nationals. The coach, we were all devastated. It was a big blow to me. But
slam, technically, that's not illegal, is it?
Well, in the collegiate style,
okay.
The way I was throwing, I'm a Greco-Roman thrower.
Yeah.
The way I was throwing, it was illegal for collegiate.
Yeah.
Style.
I've seen some stuff today in today's wrestling that's a lot worse than a body slam, amateur-wise.
Yeah. I don't know if it would be considered in today's wrestling world if that would be considered dangerous anymore, because of the fact that they've meshed things together now.
Yeah.
With the catch-as-catch-can and the Greco-Roman and the freestyle. All of that is, more people want to go to the Olympics, so more people are interested in,
And for people that don't know, that are watching this because they were professional wrestling fans, do you just want to quickly explain the difference between folk style, which is the collegiate style, and Greco-Roman, which is the one that you had your most success in?
Yes, the difference is the folk style, which is called catch-as-catch-can. The folk style is different in the fact that it's a little similar to freestyle, in that you can attack the legs, you can attack the whole body, and make takedowns from this. The difference is Greco-Roman is an upper body style of wrestling. You cannot attack the legs in Greco-Roman. You have to throw or take down from the upper body, from the waist level. And that's the main difference in the catch-as-catch-can. There's a few rule differences too. The freestyle is and the Greco-Roman are the Olympic styles of wrestling. You can go to the Olympics in Greco-Roman or freestyle. Catch-as-catch-can is more of a traditional style, more of a style for this country. Other countries don't practice this form of wrestling. The United States, I believe, is the only country. I don't know, Canada might.
No, Canada doesn't do folk style at all.
Yeah.
I don't really understand it either. That was one of the questions I asked Dan Gable in that interview. Why, in the collegiate level, you guys don't practice the international style of wrestling? Because in theory, it would prepare you guys better.
That's true. So we are the only country that does this. So, but it's I think
there's points for escaping too in folk style.
Right? Yeah, there's points for escaping in folk style, whereas freestyle and Greco-Roman, there are no points for escaping.
They'll call you back up after 10 seconds.
Yeah, they'll call you. They'll actually call you back up if there's no activity or no advance towards trying to score. So that's the main differences there.
So you had that devastating disqualification at the Nationals. What happened with your college and wrestling career from there?
Junior college. I went into the Marine Corps after that, and they told me about this Marine Corps wrestling program, but I was a little skeptical at the time because I was wrestling on a level where I had made a Pan American team, and I was already wrestling on this Olympic level. So I was a little skeptical about the Marine Corps team. I've never heard of it, per se, but I didn't know what I was getting into. They did send me they found out the quality of wrestling that I was doing, and then they did send me to Quantico, Virginia to try out for the Marine Corps wrestling team. Let me tell you, when I got there, this team that I didn't know about, these guys were remarkable. We had about 4 world-class, world champion wrestlers on this team, and 2 of them were in my weight class. And the guys there, the program was just like, at the time, the Soviets had the closest thing to a professional team. You know, they selected their guys and they wrestled year-round. This was their job. And the closest thing to that was the Marine Corps and the military wrestling programs. We were able to be assigned to, you know, like me, to Quantico, Virginia, the Army, the Navy, the Air Force. All these guys were assigned to these teams, except for the Air Force. They didn't make it a more year-round program. They came in for inner service stuff. But we were year-round programs. I trained 3 times a day for most of my life, you know, in this wrestling world. And that's how I attribute to being.
So what military duties would you have on top of your wrestling training?
That was the thing about the Marine Corps. You also had to pull your military duties. You had to be qualified off the rifle range every year. You had to be qualified in whatever MOS, that's your military occupation, by the way. Mine at the time was motor transport, so, you know, I had to be qualified there. But after making so many national teams and stuff, they basically called me a wrestler. And a few other guys like me. They sent us all over the world, even when we had time off, when we weren't wrestling in tournament situations. They actually made us go and recruit. So we'd take the general's plane, and then we'd fly on these little fancy jets. We were jet setters, and we'd fly to Pennsylvania and help out the recruiting efforts there, and then they'd fly us to California and help out the recruiting efforts there. And what I mean by these guys that couldn't get into the high schools, you know, back then they wanted kids to go to college, so we don't want any part of the military or the, you know, the Marines or what have you. So the Marines were having a tough time getting into the high schools. So everybody knows a little bit about wrestling, and then a lot of people knew us because we were world-class athletes. Myself, Greg Gibson, Dan Mello, Eric Wetzel, you know, Lou Dorrance. These guys were names, and these kids knew these guys. You know, they knew me. They knew Greg Gibson. Greg Gibson was the Russian Slayer. You know, this big guy who went to the Olympics and won a silver medal. You know, he's coming to my high school. You know, so that was a big ticket for the recruiters.
Yeah.
So they used that big time. So they would just call up the headquarters, say, "Hey, can we get those guys out here?" And the general, who was fond of us and knew we had these abilities and loved the recruiting efforts we made, would send us out there, and we'd go ahead and put on a wrestling clinic, and we had a whole program set up for the kids, and afterwards we'd send them over to the recruiter over there. So that's all of that went.
So that's when you first met Randy Couture. It was during that period.
Yes, Randy Couture was on the Army team, and that's where I knew Randy. Yeah, Randy and I know each other well. Yeah, from our little escapades. He was an Army wrestler. I was a Marine wrestler, so we were knocking heads. But he wasn't in my weight class. He was in a lighter weight class. But his heavyweight, the Army heavyweight, him and Randy are good friends, and they contact me all the time. Actually, they do a benefit every year, close to the Wounded Soldiers type benefit, and they always invite me down to Fort Benning to do this benefit.
So I guess the highlights of your amateur careers would be winning the 89 and 91 senior Grecos?
Yes. Yes, those were big highlights for me. In '89, it was really big. It was my first national title. The same place that we went this year in Nevada, Las Vegas. It was a big win for me to take the nationals, and that's where things kind of turned a little bit, because now I knew I'm really capable, not just on a military level, but our real national team level. You know, I'm really capable. So those 2 years that I won it, I feel really good about it.
So were you like discharged from the Army at the point that you were on the national team, or how did that work?
From the Marines? No.
Or from Marines.
No. What the Marines did was they cut me orders to. I was just like any other civilian who made the team, who was a national champ or what have you. When I went to the World Championships, I was part of the Marine Corps, and they would cut orders for me to go and be a part of this because I was their representation, and they loved that. You know, that one of their, Marines could get to this level of competition and go compete with these big guys, Do
you have any stories about Randy Couture from that time that people might not know about, that you could talk about that wouldn't get him in trouble?
When I got him in trouble?
That wouldn't, because we don't work. But like, is there any stories about Randy Couture?
Well, I'll tell you a little bit about Randy Couture. Randy's cool. He's a good guy. He's a good friend, and if you meet him in person, you'd never know he's the animal he is. Yeah. My brother Kyle met him this summer in Las Vegas, and he'll probably tell you that story about meeting him. You probably wouldn't think he was, the bad guy he is, in all of MMA and so forth. But we were on the same world team together and went out to Palermo, Sicily to compete in the military world championships. And on this tour, I'm just telling a little basic story about this. Back then, we had accidentally shot down an Iranian airliner. I don't know if you remember this headline back in the day, but we shot down an Iranian airliner, and all this occurred while we were in the air flying to Palermo, Sicily. And it was a big deal because here we are, the American team headed out of the country, and there's big trouble. The Iranians are after us. And guess what? The Iranians are competing in this World Championships. So when we got there, I knew something was a little funny because they hauled us off out of the airport into a private area. What's going on? We should be headed, to wrestle. And our chief at the time, he came and told us that there was a big problem. The Americans shot down our Iranian airliner, and there's some threats going on against Americans, and you guys are exposed. You're here, and we're going to let you make a team decision whether you want to, go back home or compete in this thing. And of course, we're all military guys. Hey, we're going to compete. Whatever. It's what we do. And Randy was on this team, and we both made the same decision to compete in this competition. And they had to make some more plans for us to protect us, though. So we had to ride everywhere we went in these hot, it was middle of summer, it's hot. And we had to ride in these big, stanky armored cars. That's what I'll call them. But everywhere we went, we had to ride in these big armored cars and so forth. And we were a little nervous about that. And something happened on one of those armored cars. I don't know if it was somebody playing a joke or whatever, but somebody threw a little smoke bomb off on one of these cars. Man, if you seen me and Randy and all these guys trying to get off of this armored car, trying to get out, It's one of my favorite stories to see all these big guys tripping and pushing each other and trying to get out of that thing before it blows up, But this was an intense time, and it was an interesting time, but we had some more interesting stories on that trip. But we just got recognized for that trip in April here, because it was an Olympic year in '88. We had won both the freestyle and the Greco-Roman World Championships. First time Americans did this in any, not even military, any thing. That's the first time. And I won double gold. I wasn't beaten. Matter of fact, I don't think I was scored on in the whole competition. So it was a big win for me. and some other. Randy won, gold medals. And my teammate Eric Wetzel, he was the only other double gold medal winner. And we had a fantastic time. And in '88, Olympic year, it wasn't recognized because they were preparing for the Olympics and the Olympic team. So we weren't really recognized for this big accomplishment. So all these years later, they called me up, "Hey, Craig, we want to recognize you guys." And man, this is like 20 years later. Come on. But we did end up going out to Las Vegas. And my brother shared in this time. He went out with me, and up to this point, I don't think my brother has seen a lot of my wrestling, or any of my family, really. They knew, what I did and everything, but they weren't really close to that environment. But my brother went out there, man, and after the trip, I asked him about it, and he was so amazed that these guys took him in like a brother. All of these great wrestlers, and they didn't see him as an outsider, and they took him in like a brother. He was, part of the group. So it was a good time out in Las Vegas, but that was along the amateur.
Yeah. What do you think about the popularity of amateur wrestling now? It seems that MMA has given it a new life. Wow.
Looking at today, and the wrestlers that are out there like Jordan Burroughs, incredible. And it's a world of difference, I have to say. We had some great wrestlers back in our day. We had Kenny Monday, who was on that level like that. And, other good wrestlers, Bruce Baumgartner, the heavyweight.
Oh, yeah.
You remember Bruce, big beast, big animal. I used to hate to go in the room and wrestle this guy, man. Because he was just so big, I was faster than him, but man, you get under that guy, you're not going anywhere. It's over.
I think Kurt Angle had to practice with him a few times too, from what I remember.
Yeah, Kurt. Yeah. Another good wrestler. Yeah, who transitioned over into pro wrestling. Kurt Angle's. I was winning world championships when he was in his diapers, though.
And what's your best amateur wrestling advice for a young amateur wrestler that might be watching this interview?
The best thing to do is, number one story is never quit. That's a really big part of my story. When I was losing all those wrestling matches in those 3 years that I couldn't figure things out, I never quit. And matter of fact, people probably looked at me funny going out for the team again the next year. This guy can't win a match. Matter of fact, if the other coach knew I was wrestling and they needed points, all they had to do was put a guy against me, and it was over.
That's funny.
So anyway, my biggest advice is never quit. That's number one. And number two is stay involved. Stay involved at all levels of wrestling. You have to stay involved. You can't just make this seasonal sport. Off season, I'm gonna, do nothing. I'm gonna eat my Snickers bars and go or do whatever I do. You have to be thinking wrestling. If you love this sport, you have to be thinking wrestling year round. You've got to make it a year-round thing. You've got to compete in your catch-as-catch-can style. Then you've got to go to the Greco-Roman and freestyle camps. You got to compete at the freestyle level and the Greco-Roman level of competitions, the state championships, the nationals, things like that. If you aspire to be a good wrestler, then you have to really get involved and take part in all of what wrestling has to offer. And there's a whole lot about wrestling. And I'm going to tell you right now, for my personal life, wrestling has taken me around the world. It has made me a national celebrity in pro wrestling, that is. It's done so many things. And on a personal perspective, it has helped me become the individual that I am. Through the discipline and all the efforts in wrestling. Wrestling has been my world and my life. So if you want to be on that level of wrestling, you just can't stop. You have to be involved.
So how did you get into professional wrestling?
Now, that's an interesting story. I had retired from my amateur wrestling career after the '88 Olympics and so forth. I still wrestled for a little while, but I retired specifically from the amateur style of wrestling. And for a few years, people have been asking me to basically, hey man, you want to be a pro wrestler? You'd be pretty good at that. Nah, I'm not doing that fake stuff. You know, that was me back in the day, you know. And my buddy Lou Dorrance, my little guy, he was 118 pounds. And he just kept saying, Craig, you'd be so good at this, man. Man, you need to go try this stuff out. You know, but I wasn't convinced. But later on, after I retired from amateur wrestling, I decided, you know what? Maybe I could do this, you know, this so forth. And at the time, WCW, World Championship Wrestling, they had Vern Gagne's son, Greg Gagne, was in the wrestling office at the time. And we gave Vern Gagne a call because I knew Vern because he was usually in Olympic camp, you know, just kind of watching the boys wrestle and doing things. So, you know, and he was this Midwest wrestling thing. He had this going on in Minnesota, actually. So he was the best contact that I had for, you know, for pro wrestling. So I called him up. He said, you know what, my son's down in WCW. Let me get you in there. So he gave his son a call. And at the time, it was perfect timing. They were starting a program where they were trying to be real athletes in the sport type thing. And they developed the Power Plant, and it was just being developed. And he said, come on down. And so it was like perfect timing for me to be.
What year would that have been?
Yeah, and that was in 1991.
Okay.
Yeah. 91.
So who would have been in charge of WCW at that time?
At that time, it was Eric Bischoff was in charge of WCW. And in the Power Plant, we had Pistol Pez Watley. I don't know if you remember this name, but he's back in the day. We had Pistol Pez Watley. We had Jody Hamilton, who was the assassin.
Yeah, I've met him before.
Yeah, he was the head of the Power Plant. We had other guys. We had Ole Anderson. Matter of fact, I broke in with Ole Anderson's son, Brian Anderson. My first professional match was with Brian Anderson out here in Live Oaks, Florida. And Ole was coaching us, and then he brought us to Live Oaks here. And he was really training his son, but you know, I was an Olympic-style athlete, so you know, if you're a dad, you better give your son the best. So he used me to train his son. And we had some good stuff going on. You know, he was a heel and I was a babyface, and he was a good athlete. So we got along good, and we basically created another style of wrestling because you know, we went into actual amateur moves and things like that, arm throws, and you know, the real stuff. You know, and I was doing body locks, and people like that. You know, so it was kind of interesting in this Power Plant school, and Ole and Jody Hamilton and Barry Windham's dad, the big guy, Barry
Blackjack Mulligan.
Blackjack Mulligan, another guy I was under. So I was under all these old school wrestlers who were telling me not to be old school.
So were you under a development contract at that time?
Yep, I was under a development contract, and they paid us pretty good to sit around and hang around. Matter of fact, I got out of the Marine Corps, and I got I took this severance package. So I retired early and took this severance package out of the Marine Corps. But it's not a lot of money, but you know, I took it and I gave it to my family at the time to survive, and I went down to the school. Very little money. So first person I meet is Pistol Pez Watley in the school. I get there and I tell him, hey, I'm staying in a hotel, but I can't stay there very long because I don't have any money, you know. And, you can stay in the gym if you want. So for a few months there, I lived out of the closet of the gym, And I slept in that sweaty ring after we got done all day sweating in it. So that's the beginning of my story.
There you go. So even though you had a contract, you still paid your dues.
Yeah, I still had to pay my dues because I had to build up money again. So the contract, you get paid every 2 weeks on this contract. So
was there any tryout involved, or were you just hired based on your credentials? Right?
Me, I was hired based on my credentials. But there is stories about tryouts, and people coming in off the street have to go through a tryout process. And it's not easy. Most people leave very, very impressed by, what they have to do. 1,000 Hindu squats and jump in the ring and start, hitting the ropes, and your legs are rubbery by then. And then, keep going, And it's probably worse than a pro football tryout training.
Yeah.
I mean that, and I say that because they brought in Refrigerator Perry. And he came in, and him and his wife, he came in. I'll never forget this. They brought him down to the power plant, and he pulled up in his limousine, and he came in, and they put him through the tryout. And he wasn't in shape for that tryout.
Yeah, he's a big guy.
I like to say it's funny. Refrigerator Perry came in a limousine and left puking in a bucket. So it was one of my fun stories.
What was the worst thing you ever saw of one of the tryouts? Like someone that totally didn't make it, or like freaked out possibly? Did you see anything that like really stands out? Are you kidding?
I saw that every day.
Yeah.
This was hard stuff because they were keeping it what we call kayfabe. Kayfabe means, don't tell anybody the real story here, So that, they want people to think this is the toughest sport, and it's a sport, and it's real, and it's, So it was kayfabe back then. So these guys that were coming in for these practice sessions, man, they were killing these guys, And I used to sit back and just laugh, It was funny to watch people get in there and, after 1,000 Hindu squats. And that's with no weights or anything, just squatting. Hindu squats are just squatting.
Yeah.
Yeah, but 1,000 of them. Try it sometime.
Oh, I have actually.
Yeah, I know you have. But you do 1,000 Hindu squats, and then they don't give you a break. They say, get in the ring, start running the ropes. Now, what people don't know about these ropes is underneath those little leather dressings is cable. That's all cable. So when you hit these ropes, your ribs are taking a beating. And the first time I hit those ropes, I took a beating. My ribs were black and blue. And guess what? The next day they said, start hitting the ropes again, man. And now you're sore, and those ribs are black and blue, and you got to hit those ropes again. It's a process. It's not to be laughed at, this training process that they have there. And then taking the falls, taking the bumps, we call them. Just jumping up in the air and hitting, landing on your back, knocking the wind out of you, all that kind of stuff is it's nothing to be, laughing at or, joking about, because it's tough. The training, I've seen people get hurt in there, trying to do what we do, and then when they really thought they were tough, and somebody was surviving that kind of training, what they would do is they had a little trick in the power plant. I was a real Olympic wrestler. None of the other boys were at the time. They would stick them in the ring with me, tell them, shoot on them. So I go in there and beat this poor kid up. And now they're thinking, this stuff is real, man. This stuff is, So, so that's how we put the power plant over.
That's hilarious because, of course, the vast majority of pro wrestlers don't do amateur wrestling.
Right.
Was there anyone in your class that also made a name for themselves in wrestling, that started in the power plant at the same time as you?
Let's see, we had a few wrestlers in there that made debuts with me. Ice Train, I don't know if you remember Ice
Thick
Train.
Guy,
yeah. He was probably
fought Scott Norton a couple times, I think.
Right, he made kind of a similar kind of a debut as me, and they used him a few times. on the Saturday night program like they were using me. Other than that, I don't think many people got to the level that I did in pro wrestling out of that school, except for Ice Train.
So I guess at that time the Power Plant wasn't running their own shows, so that's why you were saying for experience, I guess they would send you to like indie shows around
Yeah,
here.
yeah, live shows. We did have one show they ran. They ran it in a bar, and we would get our training there. You know, they would put on just a little indie show in the bar, and that's where we get a little bit of audience training. You know, getting in front of an audience and so forth. But other than that, you know, we used each other.
So when was your actual WCW debut? Because I understand from the internet what it says on there, and some of the time it's wrong, is that you originally debuted as a different character, not as a military guy.
Yeah, yeah, that is true. None of that's televised though.
Okay.
Yeah,
I didn't remember that, so.
No, none of it's televised. Dark shows. They use at the time. I was probably going through some kind. I don't know if it was midlife crisis or whatever it is. So I got in these. I don't even know if my brother knew this. And I got in these dreadlocks. These not dreadlocks, but yeah, it was long. You know.
Yeah.
I put these extensions in and did this thing, and I was wrestling like.
Is there pictures of this?
I don't have a picture of this, but I wish I did because people would love to see this. I had this long hair, this ponytail with extensions in it, and they called me Kid USA because I was an Olympic wrestler. They called me Kid USA. So I had a couple of matches as this guy, but there's no evidence of it.
Wow.
Yeah. So, and I actually, they didn't know what to do with me. Eric Bischoff and the guys at office.
Yeah.
In the end, they didn't know what to do with me.
Right.
They didn't know what to do with me. So I developed my own career. I told them, well, let me be myself. Who's that? You know, I was a Marine. I was a Marine wrestler. So let me be this character. And at first they, you know, kind of, and then they brought me down. They said, let's give this a try. They brought me down to here, Florida, down to Disney World, where we were filming 3 months worth of the Saturday night programs, and they would set up Disney World would set up a stage, and it was the beauty of that was that the people that were coming into the park had paid access could go watch their favorite wrestlers wrestle in the studio. So they made a nice professional studio for us, and you know, and we go in there and do our shows, and the fans, we had built-in fans because the fans were free. They were already in the park, so they could come. All you have to do is look on a list for the time of the show and come to the show. So we had built-in fans and everything. So I got brought up in this environment, which was good. Some of the boys have to pay their dues and go on the road and go to these indie shows and so forth. But I was brought up on TV, you know, the actual Disney, you know, programs, produced programs. So that was good. And so I created this character. So I brought in my, you know, my army camouflage, my boots, brought in a drill instructor brim and a gun belt. And that's how I started this character. And they put me on, I forgot who my first match was, and they put me on with one of the jobbers, you know, job guys. And, you know, I went into character. It was like a natural for me. The Pitbull, hurrah! You know, and I had these eyes that would. And I got done with that first match. I'll never forget. I was on my way up the tunnel. And Ric Flair at the time was the booker. He comes running up the tunnel. That was great, kid. That was great. You're on contract. It was like a dream come true. You know, he said those words to me. It was a dream come true. I'm on contract, so I'm one of the boys now. You know.
So that's like a full-time contract.
Yeah, I went to a full-time contract from the school to being one of their, you know,
And it was at that point that they gave you the vignettes and everything?
Yeah.
I see.
Yeah, it was at that point that they put into me. They still didn't know what to do with me, so what they did was I wasn't able to wrestle some of the big stars at the time. They were building my character, so they gave me a lot of job guys that would, put me over, and that's the way it all started. So the job guys, some of them, not all of them, were complaining that I was too rough. I guess I was, but that's your job. Put me over, and this is my style. So they were complaining I was too rough. And I remember two of them trying to do his thing. Then I would just completely take over and demolish him on national TV.
Right.
Man, this is my career, man. You're not gonna make me look bad, and then they're gonna, fire me for looking bad. I'm supposed to be this big, tough Marine guy, and you're trying to take over things here. That's not gonna happen, buddy, because I had the real training. So I got a little bit of a reputation for being, rough and all of that. But when I got on the level with like guys like who I wrestled, Ric Flair and those guys, they didn't consider me rough. They saw that I could, if you play with me, I'll play with you.
Right.
You got to feed your family like I've got to feed my family. So Ric Flair's like wrestling a broomstick, man. He could take a broomstick and make a star out of it. This is an incredible individual for pro wrestling. Incredible.
And of course, you got to take advantage when you do have those enhancement matches, because they're designed to get you over, so you got to get yourself over.
Exactly. That's what they were designed for. So I have to do what I'm doing. If I didn't, then it wouldn't amount to anything, and career over. So.
Now, your first feud, I guess, was with Jim Duggan, and that was also your first pay-per-view match.
Let me tell you about that. I said that's a good time to bring that in. Marcus Bagwell was my original opponent on that match.
Okay.
In that pay-per-view, excuse me. Marcus Bagwell was my original, and he wouldn't wrestle me.
Has he heard your reputation?
He heard about my reputation and all of that, so he wouldn't wrestle me. So you know what he does? He calls him up and said he had calf implants put in, and they got infected. So that's how he got out of the match with me. And so they were trying to figure out what to do. And then they said, well, Jim Duggan would be a good match for this guy. So, and of course, Jim Duggan's very professional, very experienced. And I would love to wrestle this Jim Duggan because he would bring me along. And he did, of course. It wasn't, we didn't play we played professionally. We didn't play games, It was a good match, and we had a good time, and it was a good start for me in the pay-per-view world. Yeah.
And we've used him in our company a lot, and he's a great guy to work with.
He's an excellent guy.
Then, of course, you had your feud with Cobra, which a lot of people forget about Cobra, but that was, I guess, the natural feud to put you in. You want to just talk about that for a minute? Yes,
I do. They still didn't know what to do with me, and they wanted to do something. So I created this whole story, this whole backstory. They won't tell you that now. But I did create this story, this storyline, and Cobra was this ex-CIA guy, and I was on some military mission with him, and we got into some trouble, and they say I left and ran and left him to die, So he found out I was in pro wrestling. He decided to come back and destroy my career because of what I did to him. So that was the whole storyline based on Cobra. And it was actually a pretty good little storyline, and building up to it, it fell right into play for what they would want for a storyline. So, and as a matter of fact, I did several interviews with Mean Gene Okerlund, who just passed. And it was so much fun to do these interviews with Mean Gene Okerlund. Man, I wish I can get in the can and get these interviews out. You would love it. I developed this thing with Mean Gene. You know how he was. He was always bringing it. You know, he was a good entertainer too. And he would come out for the interview and he'd call me in, Sergeant, we have Sergeant Pitbull Pittman here. And I'd walk out and do my face, and then I would look at his suit and I'd make believe I was brushing dandruff off his suit. And that became the thing with me and his interviews. And every time I come in, I would brush the dandruff off his suit, undisciplined maggot, you know, and so forth. So we had a little chemistry going there, and I loved it, you know. Here's one of the all-time senior professional speakers, you know, and announcers. And here I am having chemistry with this guy like you wouldn't believe. You would expect this out of a Ric Flair or, you know, a Hulk Hogan or whatever. But me and my new self coming in there and having this kind of chemistry, I don't know if the boys were jealous about that or not, you know, but it was real.
How did you come up with the facial expressions? Is that just something you found that you had naturally, or did you look in the mirror and practice that?
No, I never practiced. I had it naturally. You know, I would get in front of the camera and do my Pitbull thing, and you know, and it just kind of came naturally. And it was Dusty Rhodes, that who was an announcer at the time, and he used to say, "There goes Pitbull Pittman. You know, he was a real wrestler." You know, that's what he used to say. But he told me off camera, and in one of my first matches at Disney World, he said, "Those eyes, man. You got to keep the eyes. That's why you got a job. You got to keep the eyes." And I remembered that throughout my career. You know, it's the eyes that is getting me over here. You know, so I did remember that, the faces and the eyes, and then Ric Flair added the push-ups. I would get down and do push-ups on my opponents in the ring. Ric Flair's idea.
That's definitely something that I've only ever seen you do.
Yeah.
And did you ever wrestle Lex Luger?
Yes, I did. I wrestled him also, yeah. It was kind of funny when I wrestled Lex. This big, you know him, yeah, back in the day, what he used to look like.
Yeah.
And he's begging me back there, you know, take it easy on me, man, take it easy on me. And I'm thinking, these guys, man, you know, this guy is towering over me, he's, you know, and he's telling me to take it easy on him out there. Yeah, I did wrestle.
How did you find him backstage? He's one of the guys that was known to not be the most friendly.
He wasn't very friendly, especially with the kids. And I've witnessed some things with him. And I've actually covered for him. I remember him wouldn't sign autographs at Disney World. Kids, man, at Disney World. Are you kidding? You know, brush them off, you know, call them names and keep walking. And I remember seeing that one time, and I walked up behind that little group, and then, "Hey, kids," and they turned up, "Hey, Pitbull Pittman," you know, and I started signing the autographs, and they forgot all about that. So I just kind of covered it up a little bit. And, I was friendly, took pictures and signed some autographs, and it was a lot of fun. Disney World was a whole different world for me, and a lot of fans were there, and I believed in treating the fans good. Yeah, I love them. You know, they're the ones who gave me my career.
And I'm going to imagine you weren't in any of the famous backstage cliques in WCW.
The problem with me was I wasn't part of a clique. That was the whole thing. That's probably the number one reason I'm not there today in pro wrestling, was I wasn't part of anybody's clique. And I went out once in Louisiana. We did the pay-per-view, not pay-per-view, but the Monday Night Nitro down in Louisiana in the Superdome. I'll never forget, that was, wow, it was a special time. I'm in my little dressing room putting on my boots, and then I knock on the door, and I open up the door, and there stands Aaron Neville. "Hey man, would you sign this for my grandkids?" you signed one for me first, and then, Aaron Neville came to my dressing room to ask for an autograph. That was one of the highlights of my life, have a guy like that come to your dressing room. So it was a lot of fun back then, but I remember going out with the boys afterwards. I never made it back to the hotel. Hacksaw Jim Duggan, Hulk Hogan, Brian Knobbs. Although it was Brian Knobbs who pulled me into the limo with them. I went downtown. And, I was never so scared in my life. All these crowds had gathered around, found out we were down there, and Hulk Hogan and all the guys were there, and I couldn't get out if I wanted to. These crowds just amassed us. And I didn't feel good about that. I don't like being closed in like that, but it was an interesting time, and we were going from bar to bar. Hulk Hogan, I don't know if people know, he was a musician also. So he can play that electric guitar a little and do this. So he was jumping up on stage with these bands and just hanging out and doing his thing. And we were following him around. But these boys were doing some things that I wouldn't participate in. And I'll never forget, that was the day that my career was marked. Because they were doing things that I'm not going to say here. But,
I don't believe it about Knobs.
Yeah. Knobs and the guys were offering this stuff to me, and I wasn't participating. But I would drink a good beer with you. I used to have a good sweet with you. A good, mixed drink with you. But I ain't doing the other stuff. And that day, I got treated different after that. I was labeled, I think, or whatever you call it. I was put in the blacklist book or whatever. I got treated different after I wouldn't. And, I was a witness to some things. So I guess maybe they felt uncomfortable with me. I don't know. But from that point on, I was a different guy.
And you had Teddy Long as a manager who's, I believe he's in the WWE Hall of Fame now. Any thoughts about him?
Yeah, Teddy was, he was a worker. He was, as a manager, he didn't treat me bad. He treated me pretty good, as a matter of fact. I got along pretty good with Teddy. But the truth of the matter in WCW was when they were ready to get you out the highway, that's what they would do to you.
Oh, put you with Teddy.
Yeah, put you with Teddy. So I kind of figured and knew some things, and at that point I became not the superstar that has the action figure, but the jobber, putting other guys over, other superstars over and so forth. But it's my job. I got to do what I got to do. So, that's when my career took a turn, and I started jobbing for the superstars. I wrestled the Ric Flairs and everybody that.
Did you ever go out with Ric Flair, or were you ever at a bar when he was out?
Yeah, man. Yeah. Ric Flair is wild, man. He's something else. Ric Flair would jump up on the table and pull his pants down and moon you in a bar if he wanted to, He was one of those ooh guys, He was really, he had fun. Ric's a good guy. He had fun. He's still doing it, too. I seen him the other day on a little commercial online there. Doing his thing. He was advertising the Super Bowl, and come hang out with him here to whatever bar, and yeah.
Were those some of your favorite matches, wrestling him?
Some of my favorite matches was with Ric Flair, because I told you, he was so good at it. He led you through the match, because he knows what's good for, that particular match or whatever. You just follow him, Don't even try to put your little 2 cents in with your little, measly wisdom. Just follow Ric Flair. Follow me, baby.
You wrestled Brutus Beefcake when he was known as the Booty Man.
Yeah, man. Yeah.
One of his less memorable characters.
Yeah, I wrestled Brutus Beefcake when he wasn't Brutus Beefcake. He was the Booty Man. I think it was kind of a what you call tag team match, and we had the Steiner brothers in there. Brutus and we had the Steiner brothers in there. So that's who we were. That's what that match was all about.
Did you ever witness anything backstage? Any of the famous backstage WCW stories?
Yes. Got a good one for you.
Sure.
Yeah.
If anything stands out.
Vader. I don't know if you heard about the story. What really, everybody.
Well, we got his version. We interviewed him.
I got the real version because I was standing right in front of it. I got the real version. It was at Backstage in Atlanta, and it was with Paul Orndorff. I don't know if you know about this, but Paul Orndorff, Vader was considered this big, tough guy who everybody was scared of. Everybody was scared of Vader, because he was rough and tough. Boy, big 400-pounder can do a backflip in the ring, you know that. Everybody's scared of this guy. Yeah. But part of this backstage story was that he came up to me and knew I had this real wrestling ability. And Vader decides he's going to lock me around and test me. I was sitting on a table, and he locked up with me. He said, I just want to see something. And he starts doing his thing, and he's 400 pounds. I'm a little guy, compared to him, But I wrestled. For real 400-pounders who trying to really, take me out. And I win. So yeah, I'm not even fazed by what he's doing, but so I just slip out of this little thing. He put me in this little body lock. I slip out of it and get around his neck and start choking him out. And look, he's tapping me, and this whole dressing room gets quiet. Now they're seeing the Pitbull and what he's really got. This guy tried me, and he's tapping. His face turned completely red. And then Sting was sitting right there in front of the whole deal. And he's just looking, and they're all looking at me, Now people are seeing the real Pitbull, because he tried me, and I'm not going to let him, choke me out. So I'm going to do my thing. So that's part of that backstage story. But Vader was known for this kind of stuff. I'm building up to that. And Paul Orndorff was one of the bookers back then, and we were doing interviews in the interview rooms, and they called for Vader. And Vader decides, I'm going to take my time. This is all on a time schedule, and things are moving, and they got a plan and a schedule and all that. But Vader's a star, so he decides, I'll get there when I get there, And Orndorff, who's the booker and who's in charge of this particular interview, is not happy. So he rolls down from the interview room and comes down into where we're at, the dressing room where the boys are, and he tells Vader, get your butt up in that interview room right now because we're, running out of time on this thing. And he said whatever he said to him. He kind of back-talked Paul, and Paul started heading that way, and Big Vader gets up and stands there like this. And Paul was a professional football player, athlete too, so but he's small. But he jive kicked Vader in his stomach, and Vader fell right in front of me on all fours. And then he jive kicked him in the face and laid him out. And I watched it. I was standing right there, watching the whole thing happen right in front of me. And you know how the boys are. The rumors get out and all of that. There's probably a million stories about this and how it really happened, but that's how it really happened. I was standing right there. That's how it happened. But he was ruined from that point on because they found out this little guy just kicked your butt. So now, where they feared him most was in Japan. I don't know if you've been to Japan, done any wrestling over there, but if you have a reputation, it's a reputation. And their fans believe this stuff is real. Because they shoot fight. Still our stuff, but they believe it's real over there. So when they found out about this Vader getting kicked and hitting the deck, they stopped booking him as much over in Japan. Because his reputation just went out the window. He was known as this big beast. But this big beast got beat up in a dressing room in Atlanta, Georgia. So.
And where was your altercation with Vader? Well, not altercation, but I guess he was trying to goof around.
Who's that?
When you had your thing, when Vader tried to waist lock you.
Same place.
Same place.
Same place. That's why I led to that story.
Oh,
yes.
okay.
Yeah, it happened in the same place. Not the same time, but the same place.
A couple months earlier.
Yeah, right. Yeah, Vader was just a big clown because he knew everybody was scared of him.
Right.
Yeah.
What did you think of Brian Pillman? Do you think his tough guy reputation is legit, or is that a lot of folklore?
He was another athlete, but he was, most of the boys, the tough boys, they were who they were. I'll tell you why. And the most feared wrestling in WCW, the most feared wrestlers were myself. I'm not just saying that, and I'm not just blowing my horn. I was feared because I was a real wrestler and the credentials that I had. Ming. Ming was feared because, he had that just raw island strength and everything, and Barbarian. We were the three guys that they knew not to mess with in all of wrestling.
Did you ever see that side of Ming? I know it doesn't seem like you were out at the club.
I wasn't there at the time. I heard the stories, man, and I heard he could be a beast. More so not Ming, but Barbarian. And they were good friends. That's why I mixed them up. But Barbarian, they said if you put a drink in him, it's like, what is it, Dr. Jekyll?
Yeah.
Mr. Hyde. If you put a drink in Barbarian, he'll tear up a hotel. He'll tear up anything. They said one time it took 13 police to take him down. He was just that wild and crazy about, he was one of those guys who couldn't, alcohol would change him,
Yeah.
He was one of those guys. But later on, his wife, straightened him out because I was his roommate a lot. And Pitbull, I gotta call Mama. Okay, go ahead, man. I'll leave the room. Mama needs me to call her now. She was the one who controlled him, and kept him away from, he stopped drinking alcohols and went to buffets, man. I used to have to go to these buffets with him, man. Oh, my brother might remember this buffet place. My parents used to go to it, and we used to go to it as wrestlers. It was a big seafood buffet. It was smorgasbord, big thing, and they used to love to go there and get this blue crabs, the blue lobster thing. And man, those plates, when you got through, stacked that high with shells and bones and whatever. They probably never wanted us guys back. They probably hated to see us guys coming. I couldn't eat like that, but I used to sit and watch these guys, man, and they would eat, and do their thing in this buffet thing. But yeah, Barbarian had a reputation.
And you wrestled Eddie Guerrero, who went on to be world champion. Any thoughts on that?
Love Eddie. He's passed on now, but loved Eddie. And he had some amateur abilities too. So, and he was always very good with me. A lot of the boys were nervous about me making them look bad or whatever, but Eddie was always, hey man, look, do everything you want to do out there, get your throws in, get it all in. Okay, Eddie, he's a little smaller than me too. Are you sure? Man, do what you gotta do. In this business, you do what you gotta do. And he was for real with me, And we had tremendous, you can find this match on probably on YouTube. I've seen it back in the day. I know it's in there. But we had a tremendous match, and the fans loved it.
Now, you're doing all these impressions. I'm wondering if you could do Roddy Piper.
Oh, no, I can't do Roddy, too. yeah, you heard my Dusty Rhodes. I'm good with Dusty,
What about Macho Man?
Yeah. The Macho Man, he was fun, too. we had this three-ring, what do you call it, three-ring battle royal. And
World War III.
World War III, yeah. And we were coming down to, we were in the middle ring, and we were coming down to the end, and I was left, and Macho Man was left, and Macho, you better take it easy on me, brother Pittman. You know, he was one of those guys too who was a little nervous about my, yeah, I gotta feed my family too, so don't worry about it, Macho. You know, and of course they ended up throwing me out of the ring, but I was one of the last ones left in the middle ring, you know, and they were nervous. But Macho's a good guy. I liked Macho. He was a businessman.
How was the Giant? Was he all right to work with, or?
Yeah, Giant was okay, and they were giving him a really big push, and they were using me to really job him. You know, I was a jobber for him, and he did his famous, you know, up in the, up, down, and gone, and it was done at Disney World. The only sad part for me was it was one of the first matches I had brought my family to, and my daughters were so upset. They were, you know, they probably thought this stuff was real, you know. And on any given day, any of those guys, I could have a good day with. So yeah, but you know, in that world, it's business. It doesn't move very well, you know, and they were giving him a big push, so he had the head for that, you know. He thought he was, you know, he's a big guy, but, you know.
And Steven Regal, that seems like a guy you would have worked well with.
Oh, man. Love Steven, yeah. We actually had a little bit of show stuff going on there, but it wasn't, I didn't wrestle him. In the very beginning, when they were introducing me, they had me come out in my Marine gear. I put on my real Marine uniform. And I would come up, and they were having this Marcus of Queensberry match he was having. And I was kind of judging it. So that's how they introduced me with Regal. But Regal's a real showman. And for this professional wrestling, man, he was a pretty incredible wrestler. As far as professional wrestling, he had these moves down, man. He had the entertainment down. He had it all. You know, he was one of the really, like Ric Flair. You know, he was very intelligent about it.
Do you think if they would have switched you babyface, you could have gotten over well? Because it seems like you like to meet fans and interact with fans, and Sergeant Slaughter was long finished by then as a babyface. Yeah,
well, actually, that's what they did with me. I went from a heel to being Teddy Long.
Okay.
And what they did was, the storyline was, each week they would have me come on the set and interrupt what was going on and ask somebody who I thought would be good to be my manager. And that's what they were doing. Bobby Heenan, I interrupted his match. Hey, get out of here, Pitbull. I wouldn't manage you if, you know. They had a few other guys that I had to approach to ask them if they would be my manager. One of them is with the Bullhorn. Used to be Hulk Hogan's manager.
Jimmy Hart.
Jimmy Hart had he had several wrestlers at the time, and I asked him if he would be my manager, and he, you know, laughed at me. You know, you know, and then he pointed to Lex Luger. He said, "Why would I want to manage you when I got this?" You know, one of those deals. So each week they would have me, you know, leading up to this, and finally they brought out Teddy Long.
This is how they make you a babyface.
Yeah, this is how they make you a babyface. Yeah. So finally they brought out Teddy Long, and Teddy says, "You know what, kid? I can do something with you. I'm going to help you out." You know, and that's how they decided to make me a babyface. So now he's got me carrying a flag and, you know, doing all kind of babyface things instead of coming out, "Hoorah, you know, you couch potato," and, you know, all of these things I used to get over on. And I was getting over as a heel. I'll never forget, I came out one time and I'm walking towards the ring, and I just All of us didn't want anybody, just turned around to the fans and, "Ah!" And this guy fell out of his seat. And I knew I was over, man. He fell out of his seat. He was so startled by me. He fell out of his seat, and I said, "Yeah, this is getting over,"
So what led to your final release from the company? I guess it was after they turned you babyface in a really bad way.
Yeah. And I started getting less and less bookings. And due to all of this stuff I just previously told you about, I think, this wrestling thing, WCW, they have cliques. If you're in with the clique, the guys who got the bookings, you're good. If you're not in with that clique, you're not good. They can do what they want with you anytime. They protect the boys in the clique. I'm calling it a clique. The guys, in this little whole thing. And Bischoff was still there at the time. They had Diamond Dallas Page is all in his ear. Diamond didn't like me very much.
No. Yeah. He's probably one of the greatest politicians of all time.
Very, very, very much so. He didn't like me very much. And,
second, maybe to Triple H.
Yeah. I like Triple H. And matter of fact, Triple H was leaving WCW at the time, and I was there. I was coming into CNN Center, and he was in the parking lot, and I was in the parking lot. And he told me the story. I'm leaving, man. I'm going to, WWF at the time. He was going there, and wow, really? So I was, I got to witness that whole thing when he left and went to, where he is now. And never forget, he said, "By the way, Pitt, what you want to do is get yourself a good finish. You need a finishing move, a real finishing move, And he just gave me a little advice in the parking lot before he left. And I enjoyed that. I like the guy. He's a real businessman too. He's good. So, but I saw him. I was one of the last guys to see him on his way out.
Wow.
Yeah.
So you were saying Diamond Dallas Page and was getting in Bischoff's ear.
Yeah, he and Bischoff were good friends, and he was in his ear a lot. And I know he didn't like me because I beat him up one time in the ring. I was training for this MMA fight I was about to do. I was still in WCW. I was training for, matter of fact, you can find it on YouTube, Choke. And I was training for Vale Tudo, Choke. And I was using the Power Plant. So Diamond Dallas Page decides, and one day in practice, I'm over there training, I got my gloves on, I'm in the ring and playing around and hitting and doing what I'm doing to train for this deal. Diamond decides to put on some boxing gloves and come in there and test me. And he quickly learned that I'm for real. Put him in the corner and then, whoa, stopped, took his gloves off, and went back to the, I think he had it out for me since then. But yeah, he definitely doesn't like me. So he had Eric Bischoff's ear, and so that's why at that point my career didn't advance also, because he was in his ear. He came to me and told me he put this gimmick on me. He was trying to make me. It was kind of a Three Stooges gimmick, and that's not me, I'm the real deal, dude. That's not me. I'm not, doing that. He told me, if you don't do this gimmick, you'll always be a mid-card wrestler. And I remember that. I remember him telling me that. And I knew he had Eric Bischoff's ear, so I knew my career was probably done with these guys as far as anything other than jobbing and doing what I had to do. Even had the fans believing, he's not a real wrestler, he's not like these guys. And no one knew my credentials. I'm an Olympic wrestler.
Really built it up to the.
Yeah, they didn't really know my credentials. They didn't know I was a world champion. They didn't know any of this stuff. They just thought I was a jobber. I read some of the comments, some of the fans, "Oh, that Pittman, he can't wrestle." I'm thinking, you don't even know.
Well, they're gonna know now because there's probably gonna be about 15 clips of you up there as well as the full interview, so it'll be out there more after this for sure.
Oh, wow.
So how did they break the news to you? Was it Bischoff calling you, or was it?
It was who was with us at that time? Dylan.
Oh, J.J. Dillon.
J.J. Dillon gave me a call. I'll never forget the call. Sitting there, sitting on my bed at the time. Just sitting on my bed, answer the phone. Hey, it's J.J. Dillon. How you doing, Pitbull? I'm doing fine. Hey, brother, service is no longer needed. Service is no longer needed. Yeah, man, service is no longer needed. We're going to pay you up to September, but service is no longer needed. Click. That's how it happened. So my career at WCW was over at that point.
And one guy I forgot to ask you about, who I know watches this channel, is Steve Austin. Did you have any interaction with him?
Yeah, I like Steve, man. Yeah, Steve. That's a beer drinking son of a gun. But Steve and I was there when Steve was there. And I think him and Pittman, they weren't tag teaming at the time. They used to be the Hollywood guys. Yeah.
Hollywood Blondes. Yeah.
Hollywood Blondes, yeah. But they had broken them up in Steve Austin. Matter of fact, Steve Austin got in the ring one time and asked me to show him some real wrestling stuff. Yeah, it was backstage one time, and I did what I did with him, and then, that was it. But it was all fun. It was all fun. And I'll share one other story with you. I was backstage in Disney World, and they brought this kid to me and said, listen, we're going to be using him. Can you do something with him? Yeah, I'll check him out. That kid was Goldberg. And I was the first one to kind of talk to him about the business. And if you notice something, they'll never admit this, but if you'll notice something, I said, you're a real athlete like me. You're a football player, you did your thing like that. So being a football player, I would use the tackle, man. And if you notice, what the Pitbull headbutt was? I would throw him into the ring and then give him the big Pitbull headbutt. Yeah. And they said it was the most dangerous move in wrestling because the guys would break your neck doing that, ruin your career. But I did it all the time, just throw him in the ring and Pitbull headbutt. I said, Goldberg, why don't you take the Pitbull headbutt, put it out to the side and make it a tackle? Got famous with it. You see that? That was me. They'll never admit it. But it was me backstage who gave him the move and made him famous.
Did you ever wrestle him?
No, I didn't. I was kind of on my way out the door. And I think what they were doing was they were giving Goldberg the push that they would have gave me.
Right.
So their thing was get him over to him, get some secrets, get some stuff going on, and then put him out there.
Okay.
Yeah. So, but nobody knows that end of the story. But that's where Goldberg came into play.
And you made some appearances, or you made one appearance for WWE in '97, where you were attacked by the Godwins. What was that all about?
The Godwins?
Yeah.
I don't remember that. You mean appearance in WWE?
Yeah.
No, I never made an appearance.
Oh, interesting. It's on the internet that you made an appearance. So
maybe it was an Indies match. It might have been an Indies match, but I never went. I declined to go to WWE.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because that's what I was going to ask you out of that question, if you had any talks with them.
No. At this point in time, I was kind of fed up with the pro wrestling world. It was too dark for me. There was too many things going on that was too dark for me. And you had to be in a clique. You had to do certain things. And I'm not that kind of individual. So I wasn't gonna put myself out there like that. Let's leave it like that. So not being in a clique, not doing any of those things, they're not going to push you. They're not going to put you, in a position to make the millions and do, and get in the movies and do all of the, the stuff that the guys are doing. I just wasn't part of that kind of clique that I would do certain. I'm not saying anything about the other boys. They may not have even been interested in doing that kind of stuff. Maybe they didn't offer them. I don't know. I've witnessed some stuff though. So, I just didn't want to be part of that.
So were there any offers at all from WWE or any
There was a kind of an offer out there. There was at the time when I was with Teddy Long, and there was some talk about it, but they could see I wasn't interested.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you know if they would have used the same gimmick, or was there talk of it?
I don't know, but it was probably the only gimmick that would work for me because it was my natural gimmick.
Okay.
You know, I think that they could have done a lot with. They did with Sergeant Slaughter.
Yeah.
But I tell people I was a real Marine. You know, I rappelled out of ceilings for them. Fall Brawl. I created this whole deal with that. You know about that, right?
Fall Brawl?
Yeah, I rappelled out of the ceiling to beat Cobra.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, that was all part of the plan from the beginning.
So
the story was building up for that because he kept sneak attacking me, hiding in under the ring while I was wrestling. Then when I was just about to pin somebody, he'd come out and hit me, knock me over, and that guy would pin me. So I said, you know what? In the pay-per-view, I'm going to get him back by rappelling out of the ceiling while I distract him. I had a little private. Remember Prince Ikea?
Yes.
Yeah. Well, he got created for me because I used him as my distraction for Cobra by bringing a box out to the ring and say, open the box, and he's sitting there looking at, distracted with this box and this little private over there saluting him and telling him, open the box, open the box. And while they're being distracted doing all that, I had rappelled, out of the ceiling. It was big, people were like, whoa, look at this. I rappelled out of the ceiling, low crawled into the ring and snatched him. And the problem was we didn't have such a good match because I don't think he was able to go there with me.
Right.
So we had to cover it up by me doing, this crazy stuff, and so it wasn't a really good match. It was a great story to the match. The interview, the interviews, and the rappel out of the ceiling to come and do what I did. This rappel got so big
that Sting started using it.
They started using it, and part of the story is Owen Hart.
Yeah.
Remember, he was using that gimmick.
Yeah.
Coming out of the ceiling when he died.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I feel bad about that. Sting used it. He took it too, and they all took it to another level. But I did a real rappel. I was a Marine. I did a real rappel out of the ceiling, and I had somebody up there with me. I hired a gaffer to be up there to make sure everything went right. So it wouldn't end up like an Owen Hart. I made sure that everything went right. But that was another part of the story, the rappelling. That was started by me. Actually, there was one other rappel. Long time ago, and he was a soldier too. Trying to remember his name now. He was in pro wrestling. He was in the WWF for a little bit. And they said he did a rappel in a not a TV match, but a Indies match.
Okay.
So yeah, but I decided to do this whole rappel gimmick, and it was a build up to the fall brawl. So.
And you faced Dan Severn, who's now in the UFC Hall of Fame, for the NWA World title at one point. Yeah, any memories of that match?
Yeah, he's a good friend of mine. He was an amateur wrestler like me on the same level. He was, has won many national titles and things like that. Dan was the Beast. He was. We had a good time. We just put together a match. We knew each other, and he was. I was there to put him over though, so I did just that. I was happy to do it for him,
And your last official match, I guess, was a couple of years ago against a common friend that we have, Brent Dale, who used to wrestle in Puerto Rico.
Yeah.
That was in Florida here. I think it was in Tampa.
Yeah, Brent was trying to get started this new kind of shoot wrestling. That was similar to pro wrestling. It was a work like anything else, but it was more of a shoot, more rough. He was trying to create this, so he bought a ring and was trying to do this, and I knew him at the time and I decided to help him out with it. Yeah, I'll wrestle you. You know, that's fine. I was trying to help him, get this thing off the ground. It didn't make it. Didn't get off the ground.
And what about you talked a little bit about your Vale Tudo first fight, which I guess was while you were still under contract with WCW.
Yeah.
Did they have any problems with you doing a sport where there's very little rules, like Vale Tudo, there's no gloves from what I remember?
No, they didn't, because they actually liked it because it promoted them. They say, see, these guys can, go out there and be rough and tough and do what they need to do. So they like the fact that I can go into this environment where there's no rules and, compete with these guys. It was almost underground, this stuff, Matter of fact, it was a famous, this Vale Tudo, you can find it online. They made a documentary about it. It's called Choke with Hicks and Gracie. And in this documentary, it was a little controversial because they didn't know me. And, they didn't know my abilities then. They thought they were getting a pro wrestler. When I got there and they found out I was an Olympic wrestler and I can compete on this level, it was a whole different story. And my first fight against a world champ kickboxer, and I took him out in like 40 seconds and got around back, did a little choke, match over. Now these guys are thinking, oh man, we brought him in. Basically, they probably brought me in to job me, to Hicks and Gracie, because I had the name.
Yeah.
But they didn't know I had the abilities of, these Olympic abilities. So in my next fight, I had this little submission artist, Japanese submission fighter. And they knew I was going to beat him up, and I did. I beat him up pretty bad. As a matter of fact, I beat him so bad he went blind in his eye later on. I feel really bad about that. And both his eyes were closed by the end of this match. Both eyes were closed. I beat him up pretty bad, but he won the match. You know how? He clamped onto my arm and he was holding my arm and I couldn't get him off my arm. So I picked him up to throw him out of the ring. We were fighting in a ring back then, not the octagon, but in Japan you fight in the ring. I went to throw him outside the ring. And I picked him up and I went, ugh! And I did like that to throw him outside the ring. And they stopped the match. The referees were looking at the referee like, what's going on? They said I submitted when I grunted. And you could clearly see he hadn't extended my arm was not extended. I was no lock. I wasn't tapping. I wasn't doing anything. But because I grunted, they said I submitted. They didn't not want me to fight Hicks and Gracie. And you can go on YouTube right now, look at the fight, Choke, and judge for yourself the fight. But the next match was Hicks and Gracie and this little Japanese fighter who could not finish the fight because he couldn't open his eyes. He couldn't see. And that's how this went. And there's a documentary on this. And by the way, I would have gone on to compete more in MMA. I wanted to be like Randy Couture and go in there and do some stuff. I retired. I felt so bad about this guy losing his eye, and I did it. I didn't feel good about that. So I retired from MMA, and this is all, you can discover all of this in research and online.
Do you think you would have done well in the original UFC? Obviously, you had a WWE contract at that time, but
yeah.
The original when Tank Abbott and Shamrock and Severn were in there.
Yeah, I could have done well. I believe I could have. I had the abilities to be that kind of guy, and Randy Couture did it.
Yeah.
And we were on the same level. So yeah, I could have been good at that.
There's a fan on here that says he just wants to say he was a big fan of your no-nonsense wrestling style back in the Nitro days.
Yeah.
And he's happy to see you And another fan, you already talked in the full shoot about your Saturday night match with Ric Flair, but maybe you could tell us what your favorite match was of all your matches with Flair. I think you wrestled him more than once.
Yeah, I've had a lot of matches, and they're all my favorite matches, really. Anytime I wrestled Flair, I was happy. I was happy to be in the ring. We had some good battles at Center Stage, the pre-tape shows, and we've had some good battles in there.
What was your favorite arena to wrestle in?
Actually, I enjoyed the Disney arena because you could be very creative there and really do some good stuff there, and you had the set to do it because they're so professional. You know, you had the rotating ring. You had a lot of things you could work with. So I love that environment.
What was your workout regimen like when you were on the road?
On the road, it was the same as my Olympic workout regimen. You know, I'd run most of the time and I didn't do a lot of weights like the boys love to find a gym and go in there and do weights. I was more of a run type guy, calisthenics, and doing stuff like that to keep in shape.
Someone's asking if you're slimming down for the UFC.
I guess they can see I've lost a lot of weight. Yeah, I have lost a lot of weight. And no, I don't plan on competing anymore. I'm done with that. And the reason that I lost so much weight was I got sick for a while. I had a career as a sheriff deputy here in Tampa, Florida, and I retired from my career. I had gotten, late in life, gotten diabetes, which probably could have taken my life. Matter of fact, I have a brother sitting in the studio here that was with me. He saved my life once, making me go to the hospital. Him and his wife at the time, making me go to the hospital. It saved my life.
And someone on here is asking about, you already talked about wrestling Jim Duggan, but what about tag teaming with him as a partner?
I did. Actually, I did. We did some matches down in Disney. It was kind of funny. He would come out, I don't know if you remember, he would come out with the big 2x4 wood thing, and I would come out with the American flag. And we had a few matches. We went against Ming and Barbarian. Yeah, we had some matches down in Florida, yeah.
Is there anyone that you would have wanted to wrestle in WCW that you didn't get to wrestle?
That I would have wanted to wrestle? I wrestled just about everybody. I didn't get to wrestle Hogan when he was with WCW. But I would have loved to have wrestled Bret Hart when he came. That would have been a fun match for me. But I didn't get that opportunity.
Is there any pro wrestlers that you were a fan of?
I like Ric Flair. I like his businessman attitude about this whole thing. I like his approach to pro wrestling and so forth.
Do you still follow pro wrestling?
I'm not as much as I used to. I don't follow it as much as I used to. It's not a world that I wish to be in at this time.
What about the mixed martial arts world? Do you still keep up with that? Yeah.
Love it.
Any favorite fighters?
Any favorite fighters at this time? I liked Anderson Silva. He was a good fighter, and I liked him, enjoyed him at the time when I was really a fan. So guys like that.
Any thoughts on the possible Brock Lesnar-Daniel Cormier fight that everyone's talking about?
Yeah, that's interesting. It'll be a good fight, but Cormier's he's a monster. He's a heck of a fighter, and he comes from my kind of background, that real stuff, So Cormier is great.
What are some of your best lifts in the gym? I know you said you didn't lift much, but someone's asking, like, what would your best all-time bench, squat, and deadlift be, for instance?
My all-time bench was probably about a 375. I got that up once, like that. So, but I wasn't a big bencher. and I come from a training regimen that I developed from spending time in Russia. And if you look at a European wrestler, you'll notice that they develop their legs more than their upper body. We believe in bench, big arms, big chest, all of that. These guys believe in thighs and that power base, you know, and that mid, that center. That's what they believe in. And I developed this because I watch these guys, and that's how they're so good. And developing what they developed was different from the American attitude. You believe you had to have big arms and big chest to be strong. That's not the case. They would destroy us when we got out there. These guys would destroy these big arms and big chest guys, you know. So that's why I decided I'm going to follow their regimen more, you know.
Are you still involved with the USMC at all?
Not as much as I want to be. I do want to be involved more. I would like to go to a ball or two, and I would also like to get with this wrestling program. I think I have an opportunity now from the summer, meeting the coach at this Las Vegas Nationals. I have an opportunity now. But yeah, I would like to go and give back.
There's a fan asking if you follow Bobby Lashley at all, as he's also a former armed service wrestler.
Yeah, I heard of him. I see that he's got a really good build. He's you know, he's made for pro wrestling. This Bobby Lashley, yeah.
Do you think the USMC is softer than in your time?
Yes, because the Army has taken over. Those guys, yeah, they joke about it now. But back in the day, we were dominant. We dominated the inner service. We won the Nationals. As a military team, we won the actual Nationals several times. Matter of fact, the second time that we won the Nationals, I was co-coach of the team. And we had a really good team. There's another sport called sambo. That's the Russian invented.
It's like wrestling, but they're wearing the gi.
Yeah, they wear the gi on the top and wrestling shoes and singlet underneath. But it was invented from the Russian police force, crowd control, using the gi as clothing. They can choke people out, tap people out, and so forth. It was a submission sport. It's called sambo. And they made it a sport. And when they made it a sport, we didn't have the money to fund it in the United States. So they asked the Marine Corps team if we would represent them in these competitions, because we could take military flights over. It cost us $20 to take a flight over to Europe. Our first competition was in Spain, Oviedo, Spain. And so we took this flight over, all of us guys. We went out there, and we were pretty good at it. We learned the rules and stuff and practiced back home, and I won the thing. And it was amazing over there. The sport was coming along, and it was sponsored by the AAU and so forth, but they couldn't afford to send us over, so that's why we were the team. So we went over there, and we decided not to spend money staying in a hotel. We had a hookup, and we stayed in this, man, this is stuff out of a movie. We stayed in this old European convent, and you know, with nuns and everything. And they put us in the basement, like a dungeon. This place had, you know, those circular passageways and all of that. And they had a room in it with a bed. But we were like living in a dungeon over there. And then we'd run upstairs to the kitchen, and the nuns would fix us ostrich eggs. They're more orange than eggs. They fix us ostrich eggs and pancakes. They're kind of crepes, I think they call them. Yeah, man. So it was an interesting time, but we pioneered that whole, you know, submissive stuff.
And here's an interesting question from a fan. WWE is using people like Norman Smiley and Kidman as producers now, and working with kids in the development system. Would you ever consider being a trainer for WWE?
I might consider that, yeah. I would.
Especially now that they're hiring so many amateur wrestlers.
Yeah, they're hiring amateur wrestlers now. Now is probably the timing of it. Now is probably a good time to.
How would you have done against the Iron Sheik?
Oh boy, yeah. Yeah, he was something else, and they got stories about him, man. And I know him, and he's something else. I could have done well against him though, but he was a real wrestler for Iran.
Yeah.
He was pretty good.
Who was your favorite wrestler to work with?
Again, Ric Flair was my favorite wrestler to work with.
And favorite all-time match is the last fan question I'll ask.
Favorite all-time match? There was one match I had with Arn Anderson that I think it was done so well that that would probably be my best match. You know, Arn Anderson and yeah, that's my best match. Yeah.
And I forgot to ask you in the shoot about Kevin Sullivan, who I've interviewed a couple times now. Any thoughts on him?
Kevin Sullivan, he was something else. And I believe he was who his character was, the devil.
Oh, really?
Yeah. You know, do you remember the Dungeon of Doom?
Yes.
Yeah, that whole, we used to call him the devil. That was his nickname, the devil. So I'm going to leave it like that.
Well, speaking of devilish people, did you have any interaction with Chris Benoit?
Yeah, I'll never forget that. Chris was a friend. Well, I've had several matches with him. I don't know if you knew that, but down in Disney, we've had some matches. And we had some good matches. Very sad ending to that story. I'll never forget how I learned about it, though. I was a deputy in Tennessee before my Florida career. It was actually, the news came to the sheriff's office. They knew I was a pro wrestler. And they came to the sheriff's office to interview me. The sheriff's like, what's going on? I don't know. And they brought me outside and said, do you have any comments on Chris Benoit? I said, what do you mean? At this time, I didn't know what had happened. And when they explained that, I was in total shock. You know, how about him killing his wife and kid and all of that, and then killing himself? And thinking, I'm out of character now. Wow, and all I could say was, that doesn't sound like Chris Benoit. I know Chris. It just doesn't sound like him. And I was really taken back by it, so I made a few comments, statements. Went on, but that's how I learned about the event from the news and at work. So yeah, but Chris, up to that point, was a great guy. He loved him some wrestling. He loved wrestling, and you could tell.
Did you ever wrestle Chris Jericho?
Yeah, I think I've had a match against Jericho. Yeah, I've wrestled most of these guys. Eddie Guerrero, Jericho, Chris Benoit, Mysterio, Conan more than Mysterio. Conan, those guys, they used to come in and do some stuff with us, so.
Is there anyone you still keep in touch with from those days?
From those days, well, I used to keep in touch. Who was good friends of mine, Booker T, and his brother Stevie Ray. I even traveled with them when they were with Sherry.
Okay.
Yeah, Booker was a friend though. He was with his crazy self. He'd always be challenging me and giving me his crazy eyes and doing all. I liked Booker. He's down to earth, man. He was good people. Stevie Ray was always talking to me about cars. Because he loved racing.
Yeah.
Yeah. He had him a little Stingray, a little Vet, and he loved him some racing. So we were always talking about racing and his, cars, and Stevie Ray was good to me too. So those guys, I like them.
And I asked you for amateur wrestling advice for amateur wrestlers. What about professional wrestling advice for professional wrestlers getting into the sport, watching this?
Getting into the sport, nowadays you only have so much, unless you go to the indies, which is, it's hard, very hard from there, because you never know who you're getting as a promoter or what have you. It's a tough business, When I got away from WCW, I entered that a little bit. I did some stuff in North Carolina. I was very strict with these promoters. You travel all the way to North Carolina from Georgia, and you put on this great show and bust your body up for them, and then they're gone after the show and don't get paid. Never happened to me, because I had to be paid up front before I even left, my door. I'm not going through these stories like that. I've heard them. These guys not getting paid. They go there and do all this hard work and good gait, and so there's no reason not to pay, and they would slip out of town on you. So some of them are not worth the dime they're, trying to hand out. But I didn't like the indie world too much because of that. And I really had to do my homework before I stepped out of my door. And they knew that. So there came a time when I knew when someone was calling me, they were serious, because they knew I didn't take that joke. I'm not riding down there on my dime and, putting my body out and risking getting injured and doing all this, and you skip off and not even pay me.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, that's my thoughts on that.
And that's happened to all of us.
Yeah. I'm sure you got the stories too, and I've heard all these stories. Yeah.
And any message for your fan as we start to wrap this up here?
I love you guys. From the very beginning, you developed my career because you liked the Pitbull and his character. And I loved you guys too, and I interacted. If you go back and look at my matches, I love to interact with my fans. And I'm very grateful to you. Not many pro wrestlers will tell you this kind of stuff, but I'm big on it, seeing how they wouldn't sign autographs and do all of the things that they needed to do for their careers. And I feel really grateful to the fans, and I enjoyed what I did for you, most of all. And I thank you. I thank you for listening to this interview, and thank you for caring enough to want to find out whatever happened to that Pitbull guy. Well, I'm still here. I'm 180 pounds now. Not as big as it used to be, but I'm still as tenacious though.
You could still beat Lex Luger for sure. A lot easier now.
Still beat most of those guys. Yeah.
And to wrap it up, do you want to say something in character into the camera to close this off?
Glad that you came out to see the Pitbull. The Pitbull's happy about that. I'm just not happy about the fact that you're not down doing 20 push-ups like I need you to do. But that's okay, fans. You were great back in the day, and you're still great now. From the Pitbull, Sgt Pitbull Pittman. Hurrah!